Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about Generation X, which was something Marvel Comics published back in the day. The first issue hit right around the same time that I started college, as well as the same time I was learning how to be a game master for the first time. Players were, for the most part, new guys that I was going to school with, like Amy Rether, David Allier, Denise Kroninger, Heather Searfoss, Jeremy and Carlson Barber. And something worth mentioning is that in those early days when that comic book was being published, we were given precious little information to go on. So if Marvel wouldn't reveal a piece of information about a character until 1995 or 1996, then obviously we didn't have access to that information in 1994. And so, for better or worse, we were filling in a lot of the blanks ourselves. As a result, our version of Skin is not as nice as his counterpart from the mainstream Marvel Universe of Earth 616 is. And our version of Husk was arguably nicer than her counterpart was in the long run. Another thing fans of the comic will notice is our inclusion of the 1980s Superboy, who is now going by the name Powerhouse. He joins the team for a couple of reasons. One big one is that he talks about his previous experiences quite a bit. That was my way of establishing that, yes, this is the exact same game world, as well as me teaching my new players about that game world. And in real life, my friends from high school would come home over Christmas break or something like that in real life. And then their character that they played in high school would show up at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters to visit their old friend Powerhouse. That's another difference between our version and the comics. Looking back now, I have no idea how we missed it, but we were confused about the location. So, whereas the comic takes place at the Massachusetts Academy, we set ours at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters in Westchester, New York. I distinctly recall that the players first were thinking that's where the comic was set when it wasn't. And second, they were wondering where the X-Men were the whole time. Howard Warnes, who would take turns as the game master, was the one who actually established that the X-Men were in space, having a very long adventure with the Shi'ar and the Brood. So while the comics dealt with villains like M-Plate, our version leaned more in the direction that with the X-Men gone, it was the Generation X team who were left on Earth to fight classic X-Men opponents like Juggernaut and the Sentinels. Anyways, before we get into the adventure itself, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. We've got an awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one takes place in 1994 in Westchester, New York, where the hero formerly known as Superboy shows up for his first day of college at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. He's dropped off and is walking in carrying several suitcases in each arm when he's spotted by a girl named M, whose mutant power is supposedly that she's perfect. M asks him to carry her things, which, being a gentleman, he agrees to, not knowing that her things are in several U-Hauls. So it takes Powerhouse a while to move it all. While he's doing that, the rest of the Generation X team meets each other in the library for the very first time. The gathered characters here include Chamber, aka Jonathan Jono Starsmore, a British mutant who produced huge blasts of energy from his upper chest. When his powers first manifested, they destroyed the lower half of his face and his chest, leaving him with only his limited telepathic powers with which to communicate, and releasing him from any necessity to eat, drink, or breathe. Because of all this, he is characteristically sullen and bitter. He was played by a guy named Jeremy, played Chamber as being more shy than he was in the comics. Jeremy also decided that since Chambers' mouth was missing, he would only talk when he absolutely had to, earning him the nickname of Silent Bob, a reference to the film Mallrats. Husk, aka Paige Guthrie, was a Kentucky coal miner's daughter who could shed her skin, revealing a different form underneath each time. She was played by Amy Rether, whose take on her was also that the appearance underneath would be a very limited form of shape shifting. So, for instance, if Husk originally had, say, a slightly big nose, then she could literally shed her skin and have a perfect nose underneath. So Amy's version of Husk had already changed whatever she didn't like about herself before the first adventure started, using her powers for a sort of self inflicted plastic surgery. Next up is Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, a Chinese American who could produce explosive energy. Out of the girls, Jubilee was the smartass, always running her mouth and giving other people a hard time. To the credit of Heather Searfoss, her Jubilee was pretty close to the Jubilee from the comics, partially because Heather had been a fan of X-Men the Animated Series and was modeling her portrayal after that incarnation of Jubilee. Then there's M, the perfect young woman born into a rich family from Monaco who could fly, had a little bit of super strength, and telepathic abilities. Her arrogant manner was an annoyance to her teammates, and while mysteries surrounding the St. Croix family would play a big part in the comics, we didn't really explore it too much in our game. Next up is Mondo, a cheerful, laid back Samoan mutant who could take on the texture of objects that he touched. In the comics, Mondo died, while in our game, he did not. Also, in the comics, Mondo was eventually a villain, while in our game, he was not. Mondo was played by Howard Warrens. And then there is Skin, aka Angelo Espinosa, who is probably the biggest difference between the comic book version of Generation X from Earth 616 and our version on Earth K. I actually liked Skin in the comics, while Kelson Barber played our version of Skin as a bully who was a former teenage gang member on the streets of East Los Angeles. Kelson didn't like comic books at the time and thought the genre was stupid. So his version of Skin became a mouthpiece for Kelson to insult everything and everybody. His take on Skin was a violent big mouth who had the prison philosophy of beating up the biggest guy on the first day to establish yourself as the alpha male. Something we'll get back to here in just a minute. Finally, we have Synch, aka Everett Thomas, who was played by a soft spoken friend of mine named David Allier. His version of Synch was an African American teenager from St. Louis, known for his pleasant, supportive temperament, who could copy the powers of other mutants and superhumans within physical proximity. Anyways, so all these characters are in the library and they are talking to each other for the very first time. And the big takeaway is that Skin is bullying everybody here, trying to establish himself as the alpha male. He wants to be the team leader and he wants to belittle everybody else here. Skin calls Husk a hick. Jubilee does something similar, giving Husk the nickname of Hayseed. Basically, at this point, there's a whole lot of friction and none of the characters get along with each other. Which brings us to the main plot. Powerhouse finishes moving all of M's belongings into her dorm room. He tells M, and she informs him that Professor Xavier wants to talk with him. So M and Powerhouse walk to the office of Professor X, where they talk, and we learn that Professor X is figuring out that Superman is somehow the biological father of Powerhouse. Xavier questions Powerhouse about this, and in classic Marvel fashion, we treated it like a mystery. So the way M overheard it was that maybe he was the son of Superman and maybe he was not. Either way, M, the girl who thinks she's better than everyone else, actually starts to think Powerhouse might be a prospective love interest. Once Xavier is done talking to him, the professor suggests Powerhouse go to where the others are and become acquainted with them. M coldly says she will show him the way, which is about as flirty as RM gets. She leads him to the library, where Powerhouse finds the rest of the Generation X team talking amongst themselves. They all turn to look at him when he enters the room. There's a moment of awkward silence as they take him in before Jubilee finally steps forward from the others. She introduces herself and is the spunky character we all know and love. She's followed by Sync, who is also friendly and welcoming. When Powerhouse shook Jubilee's hand, he gave her his real name. When he shakes Sync's hand, he gives them all his code name. Skin speaks up and says, "That's a lame name, Bendejo." And since Powerhouse's best friend in high school was Latino, he knows exactly what Skin just called him. Powerhouse's expression changes from friendly to mildly annoyed, something Skin is happy about. Jubilee is studying Powerhouse and finally comments that he reminds her of Superman. And M speaks up, saying Powerhouse might be the son of Superman, something which gets everybody's attention. Jubilee says, "Yeah, as if, and I'm the Queen of England." M says Powerhouse has the same powers as Superman, so it's possible that he is his son. Husk was in the corner quietly reading a book about quantum physics, and she thinks that Powerhouse is gorgeous. So much so that for some reason, she assumes he's a male model. She also assumes that he must be a cocky jerk who's full of himself, which is unfortunate, as we will soon see. So Skin goes from yipping at Powerhouse to bullying Chamber for not having a lower jaw, throat, or upper chest. When his mutant powers manifested, this whole area exploded forth, and now there's fiery energy where that body part should be. So Skin refers to Chamber as handicapped, and among other things, tells Chamber he looks like something out of a horror movie. So Powerhouse sees Skin bullying someone that is currently perceived as having a disability, and Powerhouse walks over to Skin and says, "What did you say your name was again? Chode, was it?" The room falls silent, and nobody can quite believe that Powerhouse just said that. Sync actually lets out a snicker before he can stop himself. Skin clenches his jaw, clearly not finding his comment as funny as the others do. So Skin says, "You better watch your mouth, new kid. I'll kick your ass." Powerhouse doesn't think Skin's powers would allow him to do any damage. So Powerhouse says, "I'll need to see it to believe it, Rubbermaid." Skin is definitely taken aback by his comment now, and most of the others can barely contain their laughter. Jubilee is actually covering her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back. Skin is not happy being humiliated like this, and his gray face actually starts to turn a little red. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You ain't talking to me that way, punk." Now, the interesting thing that is happening here is that on Powerhouse's end, he thinks he is sticking up for Chamber. He thinks Skin was bullying a disabled person. So Powerhouse is trying to do what he thinks is the right thing. But Husk is seeing Powerhouse call Skin names. So on her end, she thinks Powerhouse is just the bigger bully. So what Powerhouse sees as heroic, Husk sees as villainous. Skin stares at Powerhouse for a moment, his jaw clenching. He's trying really hard to not punch the Boy of Steel. Sync is standing off to the side, looking at the two of them almost like he's watching a tennis match. And he looks like he's loving every minute of this exchange. Powerhouse says, "Go ahead, hit me, tire yourself out. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm sure as hell not going to stand around and watch you bully people." Skin says, "You don't know who you're messing with." Powerhouse says, "Show me." So finally, Skin punches Powerhouse, and it is like throwing silly putty at a brick wall. His hand completely flattens out when it connects with the broad, muscular chest of Powerhouse. Skin is furious that Powerhouse took no damage. Jubilee is loving this, and now she thinks of Powerhouse as a prospective love interest too. something that's going to backfire later, but I digress. Skin runs his mouth, so then Powerhouse says, just let me know when it's my turn. My heat vision is going to give you a sunburn you won't soon forget, which Husk hears and hates. Sink says, nice one, and he gives Powerhouse a high five. Jubilee is now standing close to Powerhouse and has a little bit of a crush. M sees all of this and is studying it. Powerhouse says, quick show of hands. Who here has been insulted by Skin today? And everybody raises their hand. Jubilee speaks up. He insults everyone. It's just kind of his thing. Powerhouse says, take a good look around, Skin. You're stuck here with these people for 4 years. You are not off to a great start. Skin glares at him, his jaw clenching again. Shut up. Nobody asked you, Mr. Perfect. Powerhouse says, you still want to go, Rumple Foreskin? You want to take this outside? Skin looks like he really, really wants to punch Powerhouse. But instead, he just glares and mumbles to himself while walking away. Just then, the White Queen, aka Emma Frost, walks in with Banshee, aka Sean Cassidy. If Charles Xavier is like the school principal, then these two are the teachers. Emma Frost's eyes travel over everyone before finally coming to rest on Powerhouse. Her lips curl into a sly smile. Ah, so the two of you had a little disagreement, did you? How interesting. Powerhouse says, I'm sorry if I was out of line. I just couldn't stand by and watch Skin bully other people, especially Chamber for his disability. Chamber looks at Powerhouse when he says that, taking it in, but as is so often the case, Chamber says nothing. Emma Frost says, so you're a hero then? Powerhouse says he used to be the leader of a team back home called the Continuum, and he launches into some exposition that gave the players information about the game world they were now playing in. White Queen and Banshee exchange a look, like they're silently communicating with each other. Then Emma smirks, Powerhouse again, and says, well, well, I'm sensing a lot of leadership potential in you, young man. Banshee finally speaks up for the first time. I hope you understand you'll be expected to set a good example for the other students while you're here, lad. Powerhouse can't help but notice how hot Emma Frost is, and for a moment, his imagination runs wild. Frost gives Powerhouse a knowing smirk and raises an eyebrow in acknowledgement. She speaks to him. Now, young man, watch your manners. We don't speak to ladies like that here. Powerhouse goes to say he didn't say anything out loud. Emma Frost says, no, but you thought a lot of things. She just smiles while everyone else watches the interaction. The other students don't know if they should be scared or entertained right now. And Banshee looks like he wants to be anywhere else in the world. Frost walks over to Powerhouse until she's only a few inches away. Then she tilts her head and looks up at him with a slightly challenging smile on her face. She's obviously enjoying teasing him. Oh, yes, you definitely have a dirty little mind, don't you? It's almost scandalous, the things I'm seeing in there. Powerhouse is mortified and apologizes, unable to rein in his thoughts. He's only used to controlling what he says out loud. Emma lightly pats him on the chest and speaks again. No need to apologize for your thoughts, dear boy. You're at an age where it's perfectly natural to feel certain things. It's also worth noting that Husk is seeing all of this too, and it is not making her like Powerhouse anymore. Banshee is standing right here, of course, and he's not thrilled either. So he tries to get things back on track by saying it's time for the students to go get their school uniforms. So the students go down to where there is a large metallic room full of computer equipment in what is basically a 3D printer. Each student steps into a circle, and they stand with their legs spread a little and their arms straight out, and they are scanned, and the information is fed into the computer, which then manufactures a tight red costume. They are all issued yellow gloves and yellow boots, as well as a yellow utility belt with a round blue belt buckle bearing the black X-Men X logo. The team splits up, with the girls going to the locker room to change while the boys go to their own locker room. Then, after that, they all line up for inspection. Banshee checks to make sure the machine worked properly. Nobody needs refit. Emma Frost also inspects the students in their new tights, especially Powerhouse, who she is thinking about tutoring after school. Banshee, of course, opposes this and has told Emma plenty of times to walk the path of the straight and narrow, or she won't be a teacher. Banshee dismisses the class, and everyone falls out of line. M is expressionless, not caring about her costume one way or another, while Sink loves his, and Skin hates how restrictive his is. Powerhouse isn't loving his costume either, so he moves around a little bit. His old costume fit great, and it was like a pair of comfortable old shoes, while this new suit is thicker and it's not broken in yet. And it doesn't breathe either, and it feels restrictive. He feels like he's going to bust a seam with his super strength. So while he's looking at the bicep seam to test that theory, Jubilee decides to flirt with him, and her idea of flirting is teasing him. As he flexes, Jubilee notices and lets out an amused giggle. Trying to show us your muscles, Powerhouse? Powerhouse is a little embarrassed and says he feels like he's going to rip this thing. Jubilee keeps pushing further and further, saying things like, yeah, right. Powerhouse thinks back to what was said earlier about him having leadership potential, and he's not sure if that's an official thing or not. So he thinks about trying to use some element of authority to get Jubilee to stop, but he doesn't. Instead, he talks about how these suits are like uncomfortable new shoes. Husk suggests they could go jogging, which Jubilee hates the sound of. Sink suggests basketball, and the kids are all torn about 50-50 on that one. And then Powerhouse asks how everybody feels about dodgeball, and Skin loves it. It means he can hit people with balls, which sounds good to him. Pretty much everyone else is on board too. So they go out to the basketball court that hides the Blackbird's secret hangar and put a bunch of dodgeballs at center court. Powerhouse suggests they not use their superpowers, and nobody likes that idea. Powerhouse then asks him if he should use his super strength to catch every ball and his super strength to throw it back at them. And they agree they like the rule about not using powers after all. Powerhouse and Jubilee are team captains, and the first person Jubilee picks is Sink, which Powerhouse is disappointed to see because out of everybody here, Sink seems like the best candidate to be his new best friend. Powerhouse thinks about the bullying earlier in the library, so his first pick is Chamber, so that Chamber won't feel like everybody hates him on his first day here. Chamber had been silently deep in a state of depression, so he's surprised to be Powerhouse's first pick. Jubilee then picks Skin, who is very happy to be in a situation where he can throw stuff at Powerhouse, who humiliated him earlier. Out of all the girls here, Powerhouse is the most interested in Husk, who ironically appears to be the one who's the least interested in him. Aside from looking like a human Barbie doll, he saw her reading a book on quantum physics when she was in the library. So he's hoping that if they're on the same team, maybe some sparks could fly. On her end, Husk can't believe that Powerhouse picked her before M, who's perfect. In fact, M can't believe it either. Thanks to how stuck up she is, M actually gets picked last. And due to an odd number of participants, they let her decide which team she's on, so M chooses Jubilee. So that said, the game begins and everybody plays dodgeball. As they do, Banshee and the White Queen watch. Banshee sees what Powerhouse is doing. letting Skin let out his violent frustrations in a more acceptable way, forcing kids who don't get along to work together, etc. At one point, Powerhouse gets hit by the ball and is out of the game. So Banshee waves him over and tells Powerhouse that he is officially the team leader, in the same way that Cyclops leads the X-Men in the field. Powerhouse accepts, knowing that he and Jubilee are the only two experienced superheroes in the group. Banshee says the only reason they didn't go with Jubilee is how snarky she is all the time. Her inability to shut her mouth cost her the position. That said, Banshee says Powerhouse still has a lot to learn. The way he handled the bullying in the library earlier could have gone better. Emma Frost tells Powerhouse about her old students, the Hellions, and everything that went wrong there. Eventually, the dodgeball game comes to an end, and the Generation X kids see Powerhouse talking with Emma and Sean, and they wonder what's going on. Jubilee thought she'd be squad leader since she was already previously a member of the X-Men, and Powerhouse wasn't, so she starts to get angry. When Powerhouse is done, Banshee and White Queen walk back into the school, and Powerhouse walks over to the basketball court. "What was that about?" Jubilee asks in an irritated tone of voice. Powerhouse tries to be humble, and he tells the others what Banshee and the White Queen said. Jubilee gets mad and argues it, so Powerhouse tells her to go talk to them, and she does. Skin refers to Powerhouse as the teacher's pet. Powerhouse says it's not like that, explaining that he had countless adventures in high school, and out of everyone in this conversation right now, he's the only one who has, for instance, fought Sentinels and lived to tell the tale. Astonishingly, Skin doesn't put up much of a fight. In fact, the dodgeball games seem to have worked wonders for everyone except Jubilee, who speaks with Banshee and Emma and finds out why she didn't get the job. Jubilee is hurt and angry and actually cries in the locker room, and she resents Powerhouse. Speaking of which, after everyone hits the showers, they go back to their dorms. It's been a weird day, and Powerhouse feels weary, not thrilled with how his first day of college has gone. He'd like nothing more than to lay down, but when he walks into his room, he realized all of his suitcases are still on his bed and he's never unpacked a thing. So instead of resting, he starts to put everything away. As he gets settled into his new room, he hears a soft knock at his doorway. He looks up and sees Husk standing there leaning against the frame slightly. He doesn't say anything for a moment and is just looking at him with a quiet, bashful look, then finally speaks up. "Can I come in?" Powerhouse says, "Yeah, of course." Husk smiles softly as he agrees, and she slowly walks into the room. She gazes around his dorm for a few seconds, looking at his bed and desk, before finally pulling her gaze back to him again. "So, teacher's pet, huh?" Powerhouse is attracted to her, and this is not what he was hoping she came to say. "That's not how I would phrase it," he says. Husk's lips work up as she notices the look on his face. There's a hint of amusement in her eyes. She walks slowly closer to him, her tone taking on a soft, almost teasing quality. "Oh no? How would you put it then?" So Powerhouse sits down on his bed, and we get another exposition dump about all of his adventures in the continuum. Husk silently processes everything he just told her, and it's clear the story definitely has her full attention now. After a few moments of thought, she finally speaks up again. Her voice is still soft, but the amusement is gone, and it's obvious just how much the tale has impressed her. "You did all that when you were in high school?" Powerhouse nods and says he misses his old high school friends. He was so excited to go off to college, but now he's here, and his first day is not what he expected. She asks what he did expect, and he says he'd hoped for light-hearted adventures, not Skin picking a fight with him, or M being condescending, or Jubilee lashing out at him. Husk asks what he thinks of her, and Powerhouse blushes. He gives too much away without even trying to. He says that this is his first time that he and Husk have had a conversation, so he doesn't know enough to go and form an opinion, which is not what Husk was hoping to hear either. But she noticed him blushing, and Husk is a little amused by how he reacts to her. She takes a step closer to him, almost like she's a magnet, slowly being drawn to him. She continues to speak in a soft, almost flirty tone. You think we should get to know each other, huh? How should we go about doing that? Powerhouse is shy, but manages to suggest that maybe they could go on a date. Husk's face breaks out into a genuine, wide smile at his answer. It's obvious that she's very pleased with this idea. I'd love to go on a date with you, she responds. So the two of them head for the front door of the school, and as they walk out, Chamber, Jubilee, Mondo, Skin, and Sync are there playing hacky sack. Skin asks where they're off to. Powerhouse says that they're going to go into Westchester and grab a bite to eat. So Skin teases them for going on a date. They pay him no mind, though, and Powerhouse scoops Husk up in his arms and flies up, up, and away. Which brings us to the epilogue. In Westchester, there's a small mom and pop's pizza parlor. Powerhouse and Husk talk and realize they both grew up in rural environments. They both want to settle down one day, get married, have kids, have a white picket fence, all of that jazz. They even love all the same music and movies. The more things they find in common, from important things to trivial things, the more the two of them slowly begin to fall in love. They become a couple and return to the school holding hands. They go back to his dorm room where they talk for a while and at the end of the night have their first kiss. And that seems like a pretty good point to stop. We ran this adventure using GURPS Supers with plenty of house rules, and instead of a traditional fight with the supervillain of the week, the most dice rolling that we did in this adventure was for the dodgeball game. Each character used the throwing skill to lob the dodgeball at another character, and then the target would then use the dodge game mechanic from GURPS, which I always liked. This adventure was an introduction for a whole new generation of players. And in the following adventure, we had Sentinels attack the school. In that adventure, Chamber died, and Husk kept shedding layers throughout the campaign so that she would have a body of metal. Husk stayed metallic in our game for a long time, actually, shedding layer after layer until eventually she had a body of adamantium. We also made entirely new characters and added them to the campus as even more students were enrolling. I really enjoyed this game, and I hope that you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, as always, smash like, leave us a comment, and make sure you're subscribed. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.